Good morning, Pleasanton. I'm Ed Diolazo. I'm Assistant Superintendent of Student Support Services. It's good to join all of you this morning. I'd like my two colleagues to introduce themselves.
Good morning, Pleasanton. My name is Mary Jude Doerpinghaus. I'm the Director of Special Education in Pleasanton Unified School District.
Good morning, Pleasanton. My name is Ashley Sprader, and I am the PBIS Coordinator with Pleasanton Unified, which is Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports.
So thanks for joining us again this morning. We're excited to talk about two departments within the Student Services Support Services Division, and those are in special education and also in student services. So this is the last day of the first week of distance learning. And so we've had a great time looking and seeing all the great things that are happening out there with our students, the collaboration between our teachers, all the virtual classrooms that are happening right now. All of this works because of the conversations that are being had between case managers, what I mean by that are our IEP case managers and our teachers, and the conversations they're having with their parents. So we have identified some areas of growth, but for the most part, things are going pretty well. And so it's really about us working together and making sure that we continue to have conversations and collaborate. So with that, I'm going to throw it over to Mary Jude and have her talk about some specific details in special education.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Diolazo. So some of you may know or may not know, we have about 1,500 students in our district who have IEPs. And so with that, there could be 1,500 different IEP plans during the school year and 1,500 different versions of remote learning and teaching right now. So I want to share some of the things that you might see happening across the district, with the caveat that what it might look like for your student will be different than perhaps your neighbor's student, or even in the same classroom, other kids that are in the classroom. Certainly our model is looking very differently right now, and not just in terms of our service delivery platforms and how we're doing teaching and learning in special education, but also in terms of minutes and how we serve those minutes. We are working to the best of our ability, to the greatest extent possible, to get as close to those IEP service minutes, but we know that the way it's looking right now, it is going to be different. We are also using best practices and trying to serve our students through different models based on their IEP goals and the services that they have. So with that kind of caveat, I wanted to share just a few things as we go across our learners, from our littlest ones at preschool to our transition students. So in preschool, you might see a daily lesson coming home or a weekly lesson plan where our teachers are providing you with all kinds of activities that you can do across the different learning domains. You might have art and music and pre-academics and language and social activities and things of that nature. I've even heard that some of our kiddos have had birthdays celebrated during this school dismissal, and our teachers have found really extraordinary ways to be able to celebrate the birthdays of our littlest ones. At the elementary level, you might see video conferencing through Zoom or Google Meet. You might see digital platforms that they're learning to reinforce math skills or reading skills or writing skills. You might see workbooks that were delivered. Some of our students are participating in really specific programs, and they actually need the booklets that they've been working on during the school year. So you might have picked them up at the school, or we deliver them to your homes so that they can work on continuing those skills. What you might not know and might not see is that at all of our sites, as Mr. Diolazo mentioned, there's a lot of behind the scenes work that's happening with our special education teachers, working with our general education teachers. And also that means them connecting on those Google Classrooms that the general education students are working off of. At the secondary level, you're going to see similar things with Google Classrooms, remote teaching. You might see lessons coming through from email. You might see videos, demonstration lessons, a wide variety of virtual platforms as well. Our transition students, you might see a Google Meet where they're getting together and meeting with their fellow students and their educators online. You also might see the unique learning program and those daily living skills and those skills that your students are working on and goals to be continued during this time. I would be remiss not to include all of our specialists, our speech pathologists and our alternative augmentative communication specialists, our AAC specialists are providing resources. They're doing perhaps telephonic or video conferencing, personal phone calls. They have open office hours. Our psychologists are doing similar types of things to meet the individual needs of their students that are perhaps maybe struggling a little bit more during this unique time. Our behavior specialists, our occupational therapists, our physical therapists, they may have delivered specific materials so that your student can continue to work on those skills. They might be having individual lessons, doing telephone calls as well. Our deaf and hard of hearing teachers are also out there really working hard to make sure that your students' accommodations are being met. Things like having the closed captioning that's necessary for the platforms that our teachers are using, making sure those types of things are in place. Adaptive PE is working on a variety of things. They, I believe, have a website or a web page or something with that has a number of activities for you to work on with gross motor skills, fine motor skills. They also have video demonstrations of lessons that you can do. I mean, I think overall that everybody is working individually to try to meet your students' needs. And I would be remiss not to include our paraeducators who also you might see working with your student individually or in small groups, and they're working under the guidance of our teachers and our case managers. So I think overall, everybody's being creative in how they serve your students, trying to individualize to your students' needs, and really working hard to use our best practices. Two things I do want to mention. You should have heard from your case managers by now and your specialists. If you haven't, please reach out to them. They do want to speak to you. I know some of them have reached out to you, and I know our world is very different right now. So if you haven't had an opportunity to connect back up with them, if you would do so, I know that they are trying to reach and connect with you, and we want our efforts to be a continued partnership as we work together, not just during the school year in partnership with our families and our students, but especially during this time of school dismissal. So I think that kind of covers it at a 30,000 foot level and the things that we're doing. I'll send it back to you, Ed.
Yeah, thanks, Mary Jude. It's really about those conversations that our staff are having with each other, but also with the parents out there, and frankly, some of our students too. That's really where the work is. So I appreciate that very detailed description of what our folks are doing in special education. So I really appreciate that. Some really good work happening out there. So the other part of student support services is our student services department. And Ashley Sprader is our coordinator of PBIS. And I know she has a lot more detail as to what that is and how are we doing that in a remote or distance learning world. So I'll throw it over to you, Ashley.
Hi, everyone. I thank you for having me. So positive behavior interventions and supports, what does that really mean and how does that relate to home? Our lives have obviously been changed quite a bit with what's going on. And for behavior and a lot of the work that I'm doing and our school sites are doing with PBIS is a research-based framework. And what that really means is that we're creating environments and cultures that are predictable, positive, consistent, and safe. So those are the 4 elements of what PBIS is. And PBIS is involved in each one of our 15 campuses in a variety of ways. So what does that mean when we are relating school to home and frankly, all of our lives that have been kind of flipped upside down overnight? And how are we going to create behavioral expectations in a completely different environment when a lot of what we do with PBIS is systematically rolling out expectations, acknowledgement systems, reinforcement, and all of those systems to help our students understand what's expected of them in a school environment. So with that being said, I'm going to take it really broad with behavior and try and incorporate what that looks like in a different environment, in the home environment, because like ourselves, we are battling, taking in a lot of different routines and putting them in one new environment. And that's going to look a lot different than it once did even a week ago, 2 weeks ago. So with PBIS, so if you just keep in mind, we want to keep things predictable, positive, consistent, and safe. How does that relate to the home environment? And what does that mean for creating opportunities that are consistent for our students and for ourselves? And being mindful that expectations that we once had and coping strategies that we once had don't exist the same way they once did just a couple of days ago, a couple of weeks ago. So with that, I'm going to give you 5 behavioral strategies that you could use today in the home. So the first one being routines. And what does that look like for your home environment? And how does that relate to the student and work that's coming in, schedules, and creating an opportunity for the family unit to be involved. And that could mean that there's different student schedules involved in that. That could mean that there's work related for parents involved with that. So really finding what works for your family. And I think that that is going to be an ever-changing thing. But the reality is, if we aren't creating a consistent opportunity for the environment, we don't know what behavior we do and don't want to see. And with that is creating flexible schedules, because I could say for myself, even the schedule we had yesterday is not the schedule we have today for a lot of different reasons, and finding ways to be flexible within that time and not being hard on yourselves. So we know that likely some of you are battling and looking at different schedules and trying to figure out how does that work for one place, one environment that doesn't have the same coping strategies that you potentially had in a work environment, that you potentially had in a school environment, and creating those, embedding those into your everyday. So for example, for my family, even today, is I knew certain things I had to do and that they had to do, my kids, at certain times. So we took those, we wrote those down, we did Post-its today. It could be a checklist. It could be something that works individually, but also really looking at the group so that the group has built-in opportunities for reflection personally and as a group, coping strategies, trying to figure out what does that mean? Maybe some reading time, maybe that's going on a walk. But what we did is we did Post-its. I put some things out that we know we had to do. And then I worked off of that and let the kids take the other 5 that I said, these are the things we need to get done today. And I let them put them in the order that they wanted to do. And they love taking them off and getting rid of them, crossing them off, throwing them away. There's a sense of gratitude and accomplishment and of finishing some of those things, but also being on the same page together. So creating routines flexibly and not being hard on yourself while you're doing them. The second thing being, modeling behavior. So what does that mean in an environment like home? Is making sure that what you are modeling is what you're putting out is what you also want to see. We are in a time where things are so ever changing. It's different, it's confusing, it's strange. What are we going to do with how we are reacting to that? Our students are seeing that, our kids are seeing that. So being very aware. It's really that same strategy as when you're on an airplane and they say, oh, put on your oxygen mask first. If we're not able to take care of ourselves, we can't take care of other people. It's the same principle there. It's just modeling appropriate behavior for everyone so that they are seeing what you want. The third being reinforcement. Positive reinforcement, acknowledgement. What does that really mean? Find opportunities when things aren't going right to praise, to find the good in things that might not be working, so that you're creating momentum for what you do want to see, and not just, it's so easy to find things that aren't working because they're noticeable. So find the things that are working and just acknowledge them. It could be a high five. It could be the thumbs up. It could be just the smile. It could be the blatant, I really like how you're doing that. So just making sure that you're finding moments to have positive praise for yourself and for everyone in your environment. The fourth being is acknowledging feelings. This is a time of uncertainty, anxiety, which is natural anxiety, because it's kind of the unknown. We're trying to work this out all together. With that being said, is find opportunities to check in with yourself, to check in with those people in your environment and your students. And nobody's going to give all kinds of, this is how I'm feeling, and it doesn't need to be drawn out. It could be the simple, is there something I can do for you? Or acknowledging feelings by potentially calling out what you believe they're feeling. It feels like you're stressed. what can I do to support you? Try that with your students, try that with your kids, because ultimately they're feeling what we're feeling, is kind of what do we do in a time like this, and how do we react, and how do we cope? The fifth is intentional moments to connect. So this is my final behavioral strategy that I'll give you today, is really with connection. I think we're trying to figure out new ways to connect with people that we once always had in our life daily, and especially for our students, their peers, their friends, they're not seeing every day. So if you feel like they're craving some of that, it could be the phone call. It's setting up intentional times to connect. It could be the FaceTime, it could be the Zoom. It doesn't actually have to be something that involves technology though. So think about some of those things, how to connect and also disconnect. And the reason I say that is because we need to be mindful of times to use your environment to connect where you don't have technology either, where you're, doing things. And I've been excited to see some of those things: board games, scavenger hunts, going on walks, finding times to connect that we didn't have opportunities maybe or time to do before, that because things aren't available to us the same way, that we might have more time for some of those things. And also being mindful of coping strategies for ourselves. My colleague, Elise Greenaway, spoke on Wednesday morning about our school social worker, about resources, some of those being mental health related resources, and even apps and tools that we could use to have mindful moments. So making sure what works for you is something that you're creating a time to connect to. So that's a lot, I know, and a lot of people are getting a lot of resources, but those are my top 5.
All right, Ashley, thank you so much. PBIS is such a big component of our schools here in Pleasanton when we try to think about culture and climate at our schools. And so those strategies that Ashley just went over are the strategies that we talk about with your kids. And so hopefully those strategies are helpful for you as we work towards what we're doing at home, that you can carry forth some of those strategies. So I just want to thank Ashley for providing that. Really appreciate that. All of those strategies and a whole other list of resources can be found on our Pleasanton website. You could look into the Student Support Services Division tabs and social worker tabs and the special ed tabs. There's all kinds of stuff in there for the community to look at and to use. So we're going to end with some shout outs. And then I have a message from the City of Pleasanton. I'm also the liaison for the City of Pleasanton. So I have one message for all of you, but I'll throw it back to Mary Jude and Ashley.
Okay, so I just really want to put shout outs to all of our educators, in particular our special ed educators, whether you're at preschool, elementary, middle, high school, transition, a specialist, also our administrators. I know how hard you are working to make things happen for our students. And I know, as Ashley mentioned, some of the things we're all balancing those home situations as well as serving our kids. So major kudos, everybody. We made it through week 1. And as Ed mentioned earlier, we're continuing to improve and refine in this new craft of how we're delivering services. I also want to just send shout outs to our district office special education team who are working behind the scenes. You may not see them, but they are working hard behind the scenes. Our program specialists are also supporting our students who are in residential treatment centers or in non-public schools, and working with our non-public agencies who are also vital to the work that we're doing. So thank you to them for working behind the scenes as well. And then finally, just our classified staff who are working hard to take this time to develop their own personal skills from professional development. Our paraeducators, our behavior techs, they're not only doing things to grow in their own personal skills, but for jumping in and helping to support your students at home this weekend, in the coming weeks, as we continue through our school dismissal. So kudos everybody for your efforts and for the positive things that are happening. Ashley?
Yes, thank you. I completely agree. And I also want to especially thank our school social workers for creating a lot of resources and supports that they are updating every day. Our student assistance program specialist, Monica Wharton, and our foster and kinship specialist, Brenda Montgomery. And also all of our counselors. I encourage you to look at the counseling websites that have been created for each one of our schools, and they are updating every day. I also really want to thank all of our educators, all of our parents and caregivers, and all of our students. You guys are doing a great job. And back to you, Ed.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so we'll end. So like I said, I also am a city liaison with the city of Pleasanton, and I wanted to share some information of outdoor facilities and outdoor parks. So the city parks are still open, but the city is really wanting us to practice the social distancing, so 6 feet apart, all the self-care procedures of washing and really just being cognizant of the Alameda County Public Health Department orders of social distancing and again, that self-care. So one thing they do want us to know is that the play structures in those city parks, they are not sanitized on a daily basis. So they're really discouraging kids from playing on them. So just be careful of that. You know, the parks are open, but the play structures, those high touch areas in the parks are not being cleaned. So they want to discourage kids from playing on them. Other than that, I think we want to thank you all for joining us this morning. We will see you again soon. So thank you again and talk to you later.